Hello and welcome back to part 4 of my quick run through of the ArcSight ESM platform, and in this particular case digging in more detail around the ArcSight console itself. In this particular bit we're actually going to dig into filters. Filters are what makes and drives a lot of the content and the capability of the ArcSight solution itself. A filter is exactly what you think it is. It's the ability to reduce down into a core set of something, particular criteria. It's using Boolean logic, and you can define what that logic is. So without further ado, I'm actually going to start digging in and covering some of those things. Now, we're going to do this in reference to an active channel because it's easier to do that and it's easier to reference all this as well. So what we have is a whole bunch of active channels. We can see those resources. You'll most likely have a whole bunch of content as well on top of this, but do bear in mind that there is some default channels that are available. So if you just look into all active channels, ArcSight Foundation and ArcSight Express, if you have that installed as a package, you'll see that there are some channels there. Live just gives you everything. We can see the live channel here. We've got correlated alerts, which just shows us correlated alerts clearly. We've actually go down a little bit further. You can see the ArcSight system. You can see today, system events, last hour, and so on. And I actually have just what I've called the demo live. It's part of our demonstration environment as well, and I can go and look at that one as well. Now, what we can see here is it matches the filter. And this starts to become quite relevant with regards to the data that we're displaying, clearly, because it's going to filter what we want to see. If I look at the live one, you can actually see the filter here, and it makes a reasonable amount of sense. What it's doing is it's actually making use of some filters that are defined in the system. So that's why it's called particular names. Now, what I can do is, again, I just give myself a little bit of real estate, close that particular navigation panel. What we can do is we can just click and go into that filter. I just hold the mouse over it, click the filter. It will open up the edit pane for that particular filter and display it. So there we go. There's the filter. There's the defined set of criteria for it as well. What we can see is that it matches filter, blah, blah, blah. So again, I'm limited on space, so I can't really see anything. Again, a nice little nugget to bear in mind. This is just on the edit panel where we can see that this is matches and. So this is an and Boolean expression here. If you're ever in any doubt, just hit the summary tab and it says matches filter, not correlated and not closed and not hidden, and matches filter, non-ArcSight internal events. So it's fairly simple logic there, and as the filters get more and more complex, it's easier to look at the summary. The other advantage you get here is where it's highlighted in blue and underlined, you can actually click and view those. So if you hover over it, it will actually show you what it means and it'll refer to it. So what that filter means, if I just hover over it again, it says event annotation flags not contains correlated and not contains closed and so on. And if I ever wanted to get to that, I just click it and it will actually open that particular filter. So we can see not correlated, blah, blah, blah. We can see the filtered, and now we can actually get to that if we wanted to edit that. Now, do be aware that you can get a little bit lost with the number of tabs that we have up there. So when you don't need them, just hit cancel to get rid of it all. So just as an example, I'm going to get rid of everything. Actually, you want to close? Yes. Get rid of everything from there. So we can see those, and again, just for reference, it is in all of the actual navigation. If I go to filters, you'll find there's a whole load of the foundational filters, again, on particular devices and particular device types. You'll actually find a whole bunch of common stuff in there. You'll find a whole bunch within the actual system as well, whether it's core events, all events, threat level event types, and so on. So you'll find a whole lot of stuff in there. If you ever want to just go and see if there's some pre-created filters already for you, then just look at those particular grouping sections as well. But what I'm going to do is I go back to my active channels now. What we can do is we've got the ability to do this through the filter and define that as we saw in the inspect edit, or we could just do an inline filter. So let's start with the inline filter to start with. So what we can do is I'm going to go to that particular demo live channel just because it's easier to use. And what we can do is we can just go no filter where it says inline filter, and it gives me an opportunity to give me those fields. Now the filter is only going to work on these fields that are available in this view. If you add in additional fields, it'll display those as well, but this particular channel only displays these fields, and therefore it's only giving me an option to filter on those fields that are in this view. It's quick, it's simple, it's easy. Now, for example, if I just wanted to show correlated events, I could just tick the little lightning symbol and then hit apply, and it's then only going to display events that are matching within that time period that matches correlation of that's a file type of rule correlation. So it'll just display those events. Now, in this particular example, it's still retrieving them, but there'll only be a limited number in this example because it's my test environment. So very simple, very easy. And of course, if I wanted to, I could just click it again. And if I just wait a second, this is a common thing that you'll find as capability within the console, just to let it retrieve the data. Within here, what I can see is I can see that there is, let's say, for example, attacker address. If I go into that, I have an operator and I have a drop down. If I drop it down, it will populate it with the IP addresses that are in this channel. So this is what's in this view here across all that's been retrieved. It will automatically populate those for me. Automatically. So if I see the top one, .122, I go into here, I can see .122. I populate it in there. Now, I can't actually see it because it's I'm running out of space, but if I hit apply, it will then filter that down further, so we can see it's added that to the filter conditions, the type correlation, and it's just those events. It's that simple. I haven't had to type a single thing. It's giving me the list that's been available in that channel. Now, that is not going to look backwards through the data. It's not going to go look backwards through the time or anything. It's just what's in that channel at that time. So in this time frame, with a start and end time, so we're talking an hour, it's going to look at that data and allow me to select that from that list. It's going to pre-populate that for me. So it becomes quite a powerful and flexible way of doing things. Now, as you saw in the previous sections, I talked about doing these grids and digging down and so on. If I use the inline filter, it does not add to the grid, so I don't get extra tabs here. So I'm very limited. But, it is nice and simple. And what I can do is when I'm happy, I can just hit clear, press apply, and it removes all the inline filters for me. So it just gives me a little bit of a simple way to just override all that. But as I mentioned, you can't necessarily save against that. The best way of doing that is actually do so within the filter itself. But as I mentioned before, if I just go through and look at some of the data here, I can actually add to that filter quite easily and quite simply. So we've got a whole load of data here. I'm just trying to look to see if there's some more of the useful. Let's just go with that IP address. If I wanted to add that IP address to this filter, it would actually be very simple for me to do so. Right mouse click, investigate, add target address equals to channel. So it's actually going to do that. If I wanted to add it to the conditions in the editor for me, I want to do that as well. So if I add it to the channel, just click that. It actually puts that into this particular condition up here. Again, we can't see it because it's gone off the edge there. That's okay, because it's only going to restrict it down to those. Again, if I actually click where it says filter, it opens up the filter itself. I can see the conditions, and hey presto, there's my condition in there, and those and the target address that I selected. So it's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. If I was to select the add it to the editor, it would actually do all of that and give me the editor with that condition added, ready for me to do whatever. Now, it's actually added that as a panel, as an extra part of the grid here, which allows me to go backwards and forwards if I want to. And if I wanted to, I could, of course, with that, go back to my attributes, and I could save it. I could give it a new name. So it's actually given it this investigate. So I could give it my new channel. It's an active channel. I can hit apply, and it's going to save it. It's going to change the name, my new active channel. When you save something, it refreshes it. So it's going to refresh that channel. And hey presto, there's my channel. So it's very simple and very easy. I've just done that filter, and I can define that data. Now, I'm going to dig on event times and what is relevant with regards to the attributes that I'm displaying here that's relevant to the filter itself. So what does this mean? Well, we can see here there's some settings here. So as you create a new active channel, which I will do in a minute, and it'll be a lot more sense, but I have to obviously give it a name. I have to define what it is. In this case, it's an active channel. I have to give a time range that we want to do. So you'll notice here where it says $now, that means it's referring to the current time. So now. There's lots here. You can have reference to all sorts of information with regards to timing and yesterday and time minus whatever and so on and so forth. So it's quite simple and straightforward. So now minus now. So that was the time you want to start the channel. So an hour ago and up to now. Now, as you can see, it refreshes at regular intervals. It's not 100% real time, but it'll refresh every 30 seconds or so and refresh that view for me. It normally refreshes faster, but typically in a production environment, it'll be refreshing in relevance to the amount of data coming through. So next step is to understand the timestamp. Now it's evaluating this used on the timestamp. Now I actually have a choice here. Again, if I can choose different event types here for the timestamp. I can choose the end time or the manager receipt time. Now what does that mean? Let me show you. So I can actually add that in. I can add in the column. I'm going to add in manager receipt time. Manager receipt time. Now, this is slightly different. This is a test environment, so I'm actually replaying this log data so that when as part of the replay process, it's actually attaching the time that the event data was replayed. So in this example, you can see that it's a particular timestamp there. That then gets sent to a replay connector, which then gets sent into the ESM manager. Okay, and this example, it actually takes about a second or two. So we can see those two separate timestamps. That is absolutely correct. And we want to store this information because it becomes critical. The time at which something was generated and the time that which is received could be two different things. Now this is being received and it's being processed in real time. Well, what happens if you're doing bulk data and you're doing it because the log file is only created on an hourly basis, which is quite common. A lot of proxy servers, a lot of web servers cut log files after a period of times or a particular size of the file, and then it gets created and then it gets read. So it will be across a time range. So the time that that data was received is different to the time that the data was generated. We want to be able to view and understand the difference, and critically we want to be able to correlate the difference. I'll talk more about that when it comes to the writing rules as well. But viewing the data is critical. So if I set this to be the timestamp of the end time, so the time that the event was generated on the original source system. Now I'm in Pacific Standard Time on the west coast of the US, so that's why it's got PST. So clearly it'll be based on the time. If it's come from a different time zone, for example, and you're looking at that data in a different time zone again, then that time will be different. So this is a common thing that we hear from customers and users going, I've collected some data, I can see it gone through a connector, but when I look at an active channel, I can't see the data. There's nothing there. So first off, make sure that your channel is set to use the correct timestamp that you want to do. Are you wanting to look at the event data as it was generated or the event data as it was received? If it was received and you've just done it, it is going to be in the current time frame. If it was yesterday's data and you're trying to view it in today's time range, again, now minus an hour, you're not going to see that data. So consider carefully what is the end time, what is the manager receipt time, what is the actual timestamp of the data, and are you impacted by time zones? So for example, if I wanted to look at some log data for EST or Eastern Standard Time, that's going to be 3 hours different to PST. So again, I need to make sure that my time range reflects that. So it is important, it is critical that we get that correct. Additionally, the next thing that I'm going to look at here is the time parameters, which is what we call continuously evaluate or evaluate once at attach time. What does that mean? Well, if it's evaluate once at attach time, it's very simple. That means when you open the active channel, get the data, retrieve it once. So you're evaluating that data at that single load time, displaying the data, and it will not be updated again. If you set it to be continuously evaluate, What it does is the active channel opens up a connection to the manager, and it then continuously pulls any new data back from the last bit of data you've retrieved here. That's what gives us a scroll bar, which gives us the ability to retrieve the data. I've got this set to continuously evaluate. Obviously nothing's coming through, so that's fair enough. I'm not going to worry about it too much. But if it was coming continuously through, I've then got these backwards and forwards buttons to look at the information. What I could also do is attach a field set, so a set of fields that we wish to use with this particular set of data. Now, but by default, it's going to give you this relevant information here, addresses, host names, etc., etc. It's very limited. If I wanted to, I could actually just select a bunch of other field sets, which I'm not going to worry too much about on this one, but I just wanted to flag that up. So I wanted to talk about those prior to actually creating my own brand new active channel. So let's get rid of those, put in this. I'm going to create my own active channel. So I go to my group. I want to do a new active channel. So it gives me the selection box. So what do I want to call this? My first active channel. Now it's the time range. So it's specifying how do I want to do this. Again, as I've mentioned before, don't set time ranges for these to be days, for example, especially if you're going to have millions of events in this. This becomes an efficiency question with regards to the console, because it's going to open up a channel, it's going to open up the memory store for doing this, and it's going to retrieve and pull the data and fill that memory store that you've got available with the data for you to render and do and manipulate and look at those different grids and so on and so forth. It's not an efficient way of doing things. If you set it to be continuously evaluate, for example, so if I do like 2 days worth of data here and continuously evaluate it, that's going to put a pretty serious load as I'm streaming data of all the log data according to the filter into the system just to display in a grid. That's not a really efficient thing. If you want to do multiple day span active channels, that's absolutely fine. Just do evaluate once and restrict and filter the data down. But in this example, I'm just going to do 30 minutes. So now minus 30 minutes. So start is the furthest point. The end is the current time I want to end. So now, as you can see, there's all sorts of options here that you can select. I'm going to do the timestamp as end time. Again, remembering the difference between end time and manager receipt time. I'm going to evaluate, continuously evaluate, I should say. And now I'm going to select a filter. There are a whole bunch of filters that are defined within the system. So I'm actually going to go through ArcSight System, Core. Oh no, it's actually event types. I'm going to do non-ArcSight internal events. And what field set do I want to view? There are a whole bunch of field sets are available, so let me just shuffle that up so we can see it all available within my limited screen set. Again, you'll find a whole bunch of this under Foundation. So, actually I'm only interested in the categories. Actually, no, let's just do security because it's going to get a relevant security information. So it's going to display the fields based on this security field set. I can define, I can create. If I click define, it actually allows me to create a filter and so on. It's going to give me some examples there. That's fair enough, but let's go ahead and create my new channel. So there we go. It's added that as a new resource into my particular personal group here. And now I have my active channel. So it's now going away and it's executing that and running the query and pulling back the data. It's looking at non-ArcSight internal events. It's a little bit convoluted way of thinking about it, but think of that as anything but internal events, and it's displaying that, and it's giving me a field set that's based on what is relevant to security. So in this case, we can see the name, username, category information, and then I scroll a little bit further, we've got some attacker addresses, anything that's translated, target, device vendor, priority, and so on. So it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward, and I've just created an active channel to view that. So what I'll just do is let me just press pause here to allow the system to catch up with itself. It is just a demonstration environment, so it's not the fastest thing with regards to collecting and retrieving the data. So we can see that I can just very quickly do all this and display the data, and I can drill down on further information. So I can see, well, I want to drill down on all accept information, so I can right mouse click and investigate and so on and so forth, which becomes powerful. I can then do my inline filter as well if I want to assign that. I can also then even update my filter by just clicking on it and editing it as well. So it's pretty simple, it's pretty straightforward just for me to view and display that data and just to have that simple filter attached to it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig in a little bit more with regards to this filter about how I might want to edit and just this. So again, I just click it and it'll open up the edit panel for me. I then can go to the filter panel, and now I can see my conditions, and it gives me what we know as the common conditions editor. This is this bit here, it actually refers to it here. So what I've got is all these various fields that I have available. It can look a little bit daunting to understand that, but for example, say I only want to display firewall events now. Now I can see that there's all sorts of information. Actually, I'm only interested in viewing, in this case, checkpoint firewall 1 data. So I can look at my event and it's matching that filter. Remember, if I want to see the summary, I can view it and I can click that and it'll take me through. But I'm only interested in seeing device vendor and device product. So if I can scroll down, I actually find them under the device section, fairly obviously. I can see device product. And then what I do is I select my operator. There's a bundle of operators I can use. I could do starts with, for example, starts with check, and that will be valid and perfectly reasonable. But actually I'm just going to do equals, and again, if I drop down the actual field, it's going to fill that in from the data that's in this active channel. So this panel relates to this active channel. So again, it knows what's going on here. So I know that that's firewall 1, so it's automatically there. Device product, firewall 1. So for me to accept that, I just click off it and then it adds it into the field. If I want to now add device vendor, I scroll down a little bit further, there's device vendor, equals, and then select the field, and again it auto populates for me based on what's in the active channel, checkpoint, click off it and it updates the field. So again, it matches the filter and device product equals firewall 1 and device vendor equals checkpoint. If I want a summary of that, just to refer and check the Boolean logic there, I click summary, brackets, matches filter non-ArcSight internal, so it's not internal events, and the device product equals firewall 1 and device vendor equals checkpoint. If it matches that criteria, it will display this particular data. Very simple, very straightforward. I've just done a very quick edit to that. I've added those fields in, dropped them down. Now, of course, if I wanted to, I can have multiple particular fields. I can actually edit and type in those fields as well. That's not a problem. I can even use operators, as I mentioned, things like starts with or contains. But in this case, I just wanted to show that it's very simple for me to edit that. And then I can just press apply. Apply will save that and then refresh the panel. Whenever you save anything as part of an active channel, it will refresh that and pull the data according to the time span that you've defined. So in this case, remember, I only set it for 30 minutes, so now minus 30 minutes. Suddenly, I only get checkpoint data. Nice and simple, very easy. And of course, that means understanding how to drive an active channel and what an active channel does and how it displays the data with regards to the time, the data, the fields that are shown in that, and how that reflects with a filter, and how you can then just drop things down within a filter becomes a very critical element of how we can manipulate and view this data. So it suddenly becomes really quite a powerful way of viewing and seeing this data accordingly. And of course, if I wanted to, because this is firewall data, I can add in some additional columns. Now, I'm actually interested in viewing, in this particular example, it should be the target geo country flag. It's a flag that a little graphic that we attach because we have the geographical data in there, so we can see the flag that's according. Not all of it's going to be flagged up because not all of it's going to match the various bits of data based on the target of where the data is going to, but we can see some flag information. We can add that in there. And again, if I wanted to, I can go back here. Now I've changed the field set. I've changed the number of fields displayed here. So all I would do is just make sure I can click apply, press apply. Now that then saves the fields to be displayed, and I can view that and understand what's going on. I can use preset field sets and so on. But it's all pretty simple and straightforward for me to do that. And as you can see, understanding what the data is, understanding the fields and understanding the field sets, understanding how filters operate and what's displayed within the active channel makes this whole filter process, and ultimately how we want to do rules and how we want to define use cases, makes this whole process much simpler. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. I haven't talked about things like sorting fields or local variables. That's an advanced subject. We'll cover it at a later time. But I just wanted to cover that from a very basic and simplistic level for the moment. So with that, I'll finish there, and thank you very much.